Good evening and welcome to For the People and the second part of our conversation with Dr. Yosef ben Yachannan, author of Black Man of the Nile and His Family. In this segment, we asked Dr. ben Yachannan what is wrong with a people getting its religious and spiritual concepts through an alien culture.
The thing that's wrong is an alien culture leaves you with an alien concept. The word itself said alien. And when you are alienated from your source, itself tells you cannot get back to self. You are alienated from this source. I can never find a woman that's better than my mother. If she was a prostitute, she is still my mother. I can't get away from my mother, don't care how I try. Nobody else gonna birth me. Other people can treat me good, but they can't birth me again. Then, okay. So, I have to go back if my mother behaved bad. She was a house of prostitution, and look for my grandmother to see if she too 10 to 1 I gotta find somebody in that line who wasn't a prostitute. To know what deep, great source I came from. But in this case, my mama isn't a prostitute. She is a queen. She is a goddess. She is heaven. She is the black woman who had been raped, seduced, everything bad. With her beauty, she came from the Nile.
Moving along, when did the first Greeks come to Egypt and under what circumstances?
Well, the first writer told us he came here, and that was Homer, and that was 831. Others, such as the first so-called philosopher Thales, and he was in 643 BC. He said he came here to school. So the first one to mention was the first ones to come. From Thales, the so-called first philosopher, down to Socrates, and we only know Socrates through Plato. Plato told us there was a man named Socrates. We don't have any writings by Socrates. Only Plato, who said Socrates taught these things. Now, that's called the pre-Socratian philosophers, and then you got the post-Socratian philosophers. That's from Socrates to Aristotle, and all of them, Plato spending 11 years here, Aristotle spending about 11 to 15.
And this is around what period?
Oh, this brings us from 545, bring us down to Plato, and Aristotle would be with Alexander II, the son of Philip of Macedonia, will bring us to Alexander died in 312, and he came in 330. No, he died in 327. Came in 332. Socrates about 312.
Now let me get you to get Alexander right. All of these names I know. When did Alexander come down again?
In 332, before the Common Era. He came headed in the Macedonian Greeks, who, along with the Egyptians, defeated the Persians. The Persians had come in here in 525 under the leadership of Cambyses. And Cambyses was replaced by another Persian called Darius the First. And then the Egyptians, Africans, and the Greeks got together, because the Greeks by that time, you know, the Greeks aren't heterogeneous people, all white with golden hair and everything else. The Greeks are a mixture of people, included jet black Greeks. And I have pictures. I think the best book you could see in this in America, for those who don't know, is a professor from Howard University, Dr. Snowden, Frank W. Snowden, and the book is called The Blacks in Antiquity, A Greco-Roman Experience, published by the Belknap Press, Harvard University, around the 1970s. And you will say Greeks and Romans looking. I mean, I am white by comparison to them. So you see, all of this need to be told. The Greeks and Romans, many of whom the educators were like myself. Right across there, one of the greatest Greek general, the African, is called Agamemnon. He's over there. They're talking about Akhenaten's father. They hold the word Akhenaten and call him Agamemnon. But in fact, he was Amenhotep III. And we got many, many more. Roman emperors, Greek ambassadors and leaders.
So the most well-known Greeks came to get their education
right here. The earliest ones came right up the street, right?
To learn,
in this case, down the street.
To learn under African priests.
African priests, African educators.
How would you describe this education in the ancient world in Egypt?
Oh, well, and then none of the Greek graduated. You know, it took 40 years to train a student. You went in at age 7. Jesus didn't complete his education because he died at 33, and you need to enter at 7, and you came out at 47.
Now, let me ask you about that, because you said earlier that, or you implied or said that some of this biblical stuff, okay, is myth.
Yeah.
But then you say...
From the mythology.
Right.
In the mythology,
right.
Even if it was so, he wouldn't have completed his education.
Even if it was so.
Even if there was a Jesus, the one that they're talking about, a Christian era Jesus. Because Jesus is the mythological figure of a person before him. There's Annie Besant wrote a book called, and a man, Professor John G. Jackson, wrote books called Christianity Before Jesus. Jesus is the copy. There were 16 stories, Jesus' story. 15 before Jesus the Christ. That's what I'm telling you.
Now I got to get back to ask this,
okay,
so that people can, some people watching this, listening to you talk about Jesus Christ, Christianity, will think that you're just knocking Jesus, knocking Christianity. What is the reason for this? What are you trying to tell Africans?
I don't think they would be safe in saying that, because my own background, I have children who are Christians. I have children who, with my consent, became Christian. I have a daughter with my consent who became a Jehovah's Witness. You can't get more Christian than that. I have a son-in-law, one of my good son-in-law. I have I have children who are Muslims, children who are Hebrew, like my family were, and like I was one time. So that is at least my wife is a very active Roman Catholic, belonging to various Roman Catholic organizations. I drive her to church many times and attend some of the things when she invites me. It is not, but I tell my wife, and she knows, that her belief is based upon its African origin and got tremendous distortions from the original. I brought my wife here to see, like anybody else. I brought her here 3 times to see the things that I am saying. I brought my children. I got a daughter here with me.
But at what point do you think it will become necessary for us to break away, if that indeed might become necessary, instead of just looking at the, quote, established current religions and picking out of those religions or identifying the African roots? If you understand the question.
I think I do, and I never ask anyone to break away. I ask them to correct, because I know they're not going to break away. You don't have a people for 400 years tied for myth and then say, come away. No, you're not going to do it. They're going to kill you. You have to tell them to reform them to the truth. You could talk to a woman by understanding what she saw. Understanding that the Immaculate Conception doesn't mean she has to feel bad and disgrace because she had sex and married, that's one. Sex and not married, that's two. That there's nothing dirty in either one. This moral story placed upon the woman doesn't belittle her in either way. When she becomes pregnant by virtue of a human child, she becomes gifted with the most sacred treasure she could ever have, reproduction of herself and the man with whom she went to bed. You could let her know that she, to tell the story in church with both parties, if you don't have the sacred value, the feelings of respect, the spirituality of the Christ, the Allah, the Jehovah, the Ra, in that relationship, if the woman isn't good to be seen in the morning with you, then don't go to bed. That's immaculate. To have a sacred conception is to have the conception from a man whom you respect, and the man having the relationship with a woman whom he respects. The germination of that child itself is immaculate conception. It got nothing to be about getting pregnant and still having a hymen.
So what do you think is the most damaging thing for Africans
To tell them,
where Christianity and Islam are concerned?
to tell a woman that there's something wrong with her child solely because she had sex and didn't have a piece of paper for city hall.
Now, is that the most damaging thing?
No, the worst thing is to tell them that only they got the right religion and everybody else got the wrong religion. That their God is better than somebody else's God.
And what
That's
about
the most damaging because it separates African people from African people.
and what about the imagery?
The imagery is terrible. To put I almost said Michael Jackson, but the same thing, it makes no difference. To put Michelangelo's picture of his uncle and his uncle's son and his uncle's wife, put them drawn in the 16th century, the Common Era, show them as the white copy of the black Madonna and child, which still the present Pope goes to worship twice, at least 3 times he's gone back, to substitute that African woman in an African home with an African man, African child, African mother, in an African community with an African minister and an African congregation with a blonde Jesus is an abomination to the world, worse than the devil. If there's a devil, that condition is worse than the devil.
Okay.
That's what Malcolm means by the devil.
Okay, let me get back to this. If I understand you correctly, you have said that all of education, Egyptian education, had a spiritual focus.
Yes.
Okay. Would you give us examples of this and show us how this spiritually focused education became corrupted?
If you notice, you have not seen one temple, one house of the Pharaoh, where the Pharaoh lived. You go through all of Egypt and you don't find a house that the Pharaoh lived in. They didn't build one house of stone. They built in wood. All the houses perished because the Pharaoh and the people, his people, never live for themselves and this life. They live for eternity, the next world. And all concentration was devoted to being received, to pass goddess Ma'at and receive after their heart symbolically was weighed against the feather of truth in the scale of justice, to receive the passage, to receive the Ankh, the key of life, to become God-like and live with the gods in the other world eternally. That was the drive of the entire nation, to have spiritual purity to live into another world forever and ever and ever. All we are going to see, the tombs, the temples, the mortuaries, is based upon eternal
Now,
life.
some people would say that that sounds a lot like how black people in America, Africans in America live
That's how they
for the
think.
afterlife.
That's how they think. They don't
Okay.
live that way.
Uh-huh.
We used to live that way once, but they have driven us from living, but they haven't driven the thought still out.
Okay.
And that's why we flock to churches. That's why when we convert from Christianity, we still get tied in another man's religion. We go to Islam. Or we convert from Judaism. We can't go away because we are a spiritual people. And we are people of soul. That's why I hate the term soul food. Soul got nothing to do with food. Okay? But we corrupt, allow the European to let us, he corrupt our language. Good food. Sylvia cooked African food, not soul food.
Okay.
Gladys in Chicago cooked African food. And that woman you carried me to South Carolina, he cooked them cornbread, cooked African food. Soul is that thing within me which other people want to get.
So how did this spiritually focused education in ancient Egypt get corrupted?
It got
Examples.
corrupted when we allow others to come in and the priests start taking money. When the priest start taking money, he was for sale. And then what he was doing,
Taking money from whom?
the people, taking money from the state, the king, the pharaoh, then the pharaoh could come in the temple and do what he desired. You see it in Harlem, you see it in Bedford-Stuyvesant, you see it in Detroit, you see it in Columbia. Because the African minister is paid a certain amount, and it's his money that's important. He who once joined with the people to fight the system, such as the Reverend Natona and Denmark Vesey. How many Natonas and Denmark Vesey we got now? We got nothing but the Reverend Chicken Eater. That's it. Because he's paid, and he aligns himself with the state. And he starts the service. God bless the army. God bless the president. How could God bless Reagan in relation to African people? God bless the Senate. God bless the Supreme Court. How could any God in his right mind bless the Supreme Court? But this guy, the head of it, admitted that he took people's money before he became the judge. You see what I mean? Man, if it's spiritual, the African ministry will condemn a system that enslaved their people.
Okay, but what were some of the specific teachings that were corrupted?
Well, for instance, I could think of, let us call the basic one. Let's take the so-called Ten Commandments and start with there. I think we could go back in the Justice Department. And
You mentioned something about the Pythagorean theorem and stuff like that.
The symbol itself, justice. When you go to the Supreme Court for justice and look at the symbol, there is there's a European woman blindfolded with a sword. First place, that's not the way you show a woman, but all right. This kind of woman, I wouldn't try to ask her a question at all, because she would chop the head of me. Then she got a scale, one part of the scale up, the next part down. You know there can't be no justice in that. You get just this, what she show you. Either she, and if she hold it, she gonna be on top of you below. There ain't gonna be no justice. You look at the one in the tomb over there, you see the scale and balance, giving each person a square shake. No weapon. It is the moral integrity of the woman herself. Just like her two breasts is there, one on each side, you get justice. You nurse on this side, when it's finished, she put you on the other side. You get an even thing. Not the milk battle, by the way, with problem. You don't get no equal shake there. But
let me
just the concept
go ahead.
of a woman's body being heaven. That's the major thing. It's also in the church, and That, you see, when we go back to the concept that our mother's womb is the original heaven, any other heaven is only conceptual, then your question is totally answered.
Many of the temples in Egypt have characters that have a European likeness. Would you explain why this is so today?
You see,
Just
we
briefly.
got a myth, and we have been sold a bill of goods that all black people got big, thick, white nose, nice, juicy lip like mine and thicker, and kinky hair. And we believe it. Our slave masters did a good job. So that if we see an African got a little narrow nose, look, he been mixing. If he got thin lips, which they identified as aquiline, they were, I'm going to surprise a lot of people, there are more Africans in Africa with thin lips and small nose than with thick lips and broad nose. But I am one of the minorities in terms of facial characteristics. In my family, in Ethiopia, people say, you don't look like an Ethiopian. I ask them, how does an Ethiopian look? I thought I was born there.
You do have temples, in fact, that do have certain European figures on them.
There were temples that, during the time the Europeans were here as conquerors.
Would you explain that?
Okay, let us look at Egypt. Egypt had, and still have. I'm going to look at Egypt now. You seldom see me unless you go to the south. When you get to Alexandria, you see me here and there. When you get to Cairo, you see me there, and here. When you get to Luxor, you see me here. But when you get to Aswan, you see me. Because as you go north, where the armies crossed before there was such a thing as the Suez Canal, that thing called the Sinai Peninsula was an old land bridge for armies. The conquerors came in from the time with the Hyksos, the first foreign invader. The Hyksos in 1675 came under the leadership of Salatis. Then they were driven out by the African. As a matter of fact, the first to drive him out was in the 17th dynasty was Amus. Amus was followed by his son Thutmose. Then Thutmose was followed by Thutmose the first by his daughter Hatshepsut, and it was completed by her son Thutmose the third. Then a new group invaded the Assyrians. The Assyrian invaded under the leadership of Ashurbanipal in 714. At that time, the Ethiopians was ruling. They were repulsed, and then came the Persians. The Persians came with Cambyses in 525, replaced by Darius I, and then they was repulsed with a joint army between the Greeks and the Egyptians. And then the Greeks came fighting with the Egyptian against the Persian and decided they're not going because the Egyptian was so weak, and so Alexander remained. You get the impression that Alexander was such a great fighter. He didn't come here fighting. He came here to see the oracle of Yachannan, and the oracle of Yachannan refused to see him. Now, the Romans came in 47 with Julius Caesar, and
why did he come to Egypt?
Who? Julius?
Alexander.
To see the oracle of Yachannan.
For what? I mean, for what?
To get intelligence. He wanted to ask the oracle how long will he rule and will he conquer the world. And the oracle said he didn't want to see no stupid little boy and to talk. He had none to talk to him. It is impertinent little boy.
This was the African talking to
this African
sending
thinker,
a word.
The African master thinker. It was African master thinker, and the African master thinker, he was ignoble, stupid. That's what the word meant, ignoble.
Okay.
And so come the Romans, and the Romans were replaced by the group when the entrance of Christianity coming, and then come Byzantine, and then come the Christian era. The Romans are forced out, and come the Arabs, the Arab Muslims, and they come in 638 of the Common Era, equivalent to 18 years after Islam was started, 18 years after the Hijrah, that when Muhammad ran from Mecca and started the Islamic religion at the oasis of Yathrib, that historical document. And they came in wafts and all over North Africa and Northeast Africa.
Let me cut you right there, because I got to get this question in. You have been in the wilderness of ancient African history for about 40 years or so. What were your high points and what were your low points, sad moments? And
well, my
moments?
high point was, I had many. I thought the high point was at Aswan during the 8th of December to the 10th of December, and then the high point got higher yesterday in Daboud.
Okay, we've already talked about that. I'm going to be very crude and cut you off.
The low point was coming here the first time in 39 when the British was here.
How does the knowledge of African history, how has it affected the psyche of Dr. Ben?
It made me realize that a black woman is in fact heaven. It made me it changed my attitude towards a black woman. My behavior towards a black woman is based upon coming here.
Now, why is that so central, that behavior toward the black woman?
Man, that's my life. That's the origin of me. The black woman is Africa. Africa opened her womb for her people. And through the black woman, she represents Africa, putting out African people into this world.